What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Conversation Station. This episode, we're going to be reviewing the series finale of The Boys. Now, honestly, fans have been left pretty disappointed with the last two episodes leading up to the finale. A lot of people felt like they were just filler and setting up for Vought Rising, which, honestly, people aren't too ready for, in my opinion, because, again, they were waiting for this finale and waiting for this conclusion. But I felt the same way after watching the final two episodes before the finale. Definitely felt like some filler. What didn't really go anywhere or set too much up, even though, they obviously hatched the plan of Kimiko getting the blast from Soldier Boy. Makes sense, because honestly, Kimiko getting Soldier Boy's power would have only taken so long. I think the question would be how you could stretch that out into 3 episodes if you really had to, which I think that was the problem they were running into, which is why they made the last 2 episodes filler up until the finale. But honestly, I think a lot more people were just expecting a full-on super fight between Homelander and Butcher. And it's something that we kind of did get, but kind of didn't. And I think it didn't pan out the way people expectations, they can be a gift and a curse. And one thing missing from this show that people don't really understand that it's missing from the show, and that is that this show had no hero. There was no hero of this show. This show was about the complexity of humans, if humans ever got the ability to create chemically made superheroes. And honestly, it shows pretty much almost exactly what I would imagine would happen if a company or anybody were to be able to make some superheroes. It would bring out, in most people, the worst of our sides of personality. And that's just a fact. There's so many people that wouldn't be able to handle it, and they wouldn't be able to handle that kind of power. And it portrays that very well, especially through Homelander. Because you got to remember, Homelander isn't some alien. He isn't a soup that was born that way. He still was a lab experiment and a test subject. In the end, even Butcher tries to have this happily ever after, where he's trying to picture this amazing life with Ryan, and Ryan sets him straight, reminding him he's not the hero either, and Butcher's not. Butcher's not the hero. Huey's not the hero. Starlight, any of them. They were just. This is just a show about humans and people following things through, and unfortunately or fortunately being who they are. And that's not perfect, it's not pretty, and sometimes it's just really, really messed up. And that's what this show is really signifying. It's people, but it's also about people following things through. Butcher says this entire series, no matter how crazy things get, no matter how bad things get, everything he's ever done was for his wife and for what the wrong that was done to her. That never changed. That stayed consistent. And in those last moments with Homelander, you could really feel Butcher's hate for those moments all the way back in season 1. And I think if anybody didn't get that from when Butcher was beating Homelander, then I really do think you missed the point of what you were watching. That's my main commentary on the show in its whole, is that you got to remember that while there were supers in the show, there weren't superheroes, and nobody in the end was a hero. They were just people trying to do better than the worst days that they've had. Most of them. Some of them, not so much. And it showed Homelander as he just genuinely spiraled and began not caring. He flew a billionaire up into space and just left him there. Just doing way more unhinged things to show that somebody like that eventually would not care. Honestly, I was kind of not steered away from this show, but I wasn't really getting into it in the beginning. I thought it was just going to be a lot of gore and sexual violence, shock value, which honestly a lot of it is, and I do skip through a lot of that stuff because some of the stuff is just not necessary. But like I said, it does definitely give a crazy view into the world or that idea of humans creating superheroes. Honestly, I do really feel like no matter what superhero show is made after this or before, there really will be nothing quite like The Boys. And I think over time, people will just be able to see that more and more. Now, as far as Vought Rising, however that will go, not sure. But I think The Boys will surely stand out, even if right now people aren't really able to appreciate the ending. The main compliment I would give to this show is, on top of the writing and directing, is the cast. The cast just did such a fantastic job bringing every single one of these characters to life, even though, like I said, didn't read the comics, but when you see the panels and you see, the differences and the parallels, and you see how much, like I said, these characters represent themselves in these live action versions of them, it's just so awesome. I think they did such a fantastic job in making these characters all their own from something that's on a page. And I think it's, obviously that's an actor's job, but they just kind of went above and beyond. Also, as a Supernatural fan, it was just awesome to see Jared, Jensen, and Misha back on screen together. I heard a rumor that Mark Sheppard was going to be in the last season, but that was just a rumor that never happened. But it was still cool to see all of them together on screen again. Final of the finale, when Homelander finally has his powers taken away by Kimiko. This was extremely just powerful. That second when Homelander tries to use his speed and realizes that he can't, my heart was in my throat, because it was just that feeling of like this guy who, again, always saw himself as not needing to exert himself very much. He walked around like he was just tired of it all, like, and even exerting himself to the point of killing somebody was just an annoyance. And now here this character is completely flipped on its head. And I think it really does, I mean, obviously this is television, no basis in reality, whatever, but I will say this. Take the most powerful, scary person you can think of and strip away all that power and put him in the reverse position, and I guarantee you 9 times out of 10 you come out with a person that's going to act exactly like Homelander did to Butcher. Just saying anything, doing anything, willing to do anything to save their own skin, spineless. Goes through that quick second of like, you can't do this to me. There's that little bit of that delusionalness coming back. Insane, just an insane level of acting. How Butcher's finally given it to him with his fist, and Homelander's now has to stand as a man and try to fight, which he's never had to do in his entire life. So obviously he has no experience for it whatsoever. And you can see how hard Butcher's hitting him, and that's with just regular human strength. So yeah, just to see him have to be in this position and to hear Homelander plead and cry and tell him to stop, it was satisfying. I'm not gonna lie, it was really satisfying to see a character like that be beaten to a pulp, and to see him beg the way he did. It was awesome. And you just go back to that first season and what happened to Butcher's wife, and it, like I said, if that doesn't make you feel some type of relief, then I just can't understand. But like Ryan says later, he understands his dad was a bad guy and has to go, but it never does take away that feeling of like that's still his dad. And that, again, puts that Butcher in that position of Butcher is not the hero in this. He's just a man who had a mission and followed it all the way through. No matter how many twists and turns, he really had one goal, which was to end Homelander for what happened to Becca. I also love the finale fight between Starlight and the Deep. Absolutely fantastic. Starlight finally getting her win and, getting to show how powerful she really is. I just think it really vindicates her for this entire season, since she was kind of having moments where she was kind of having handed to her. So they really gave her that upper hand, and it was awesome to see her, fight and win that fight and just, come up on Deep like that. The resolution, Huey having to kill Butcher because that was the only way it could play out. Butcher was definitely a character that couldn't accept or have a happily ever after without Becca and Terror. I just don't think after that there was going to be no happily ever after without anybody around him, and he knew that everybody else was going to have to go out on their own. We see MM adopt Ryan and try to, get his life back together. We see Starlight and Huey, having, with Starlight being pregnant, and that was really cool to see, and see them, obviously now they have to work out their life and their kid's life and being a super, whether their kid's a soup or not. So it's just really awesome to get to see some of the, happily ever afters, if not just happy for nows. And another small little thing I'll add is I'm glad that they didn't let the relationships get in the way of the show. They just let them be apart as they should. This story with both Frenchie and Kimiko and Starlight and Huey were just really, really well told, as well as MM and his family and the struggles that they have to deal with. Just really put it all in 3 different kind of reality perspectives, not reality in the soup's way, but just in love and the complications of love and things like that, and how hard it is to love somebody. That was really showed really well within the relationships, while not letting it bleed into the show so much. Overall, as a TV watcher, as someone who didn't expect to enjoy this show as much as I did, I will say this finale gave me everything that I wanted. I was excited on the couch. I was, happy, jumping up and down, heart racing at the right moments. There was just, it was a really good wrap-up. It was an awesome amount of action. I love seeing Huey impersonate Butcher. I loved having Kimiko saying, all you say is, oi, oi, oi. I love all of those, and, Homelander referencing the memes, all those, outside-the-box comments. I just think it was fantastic. And I think people need to learn to give TV a little bit more of a break and start seeing things, take it back a little bit and start seeing things as a whole again, rather than just focusing on maybe those last 3 episodes and saying that that's the entirety of the show, even though I understand it's the finale. But like I said, just when you really do take a hard look at the entire show, it really does seem awesome that they kept the consistency of certain bits of the storylines. And again, wasn't meant to be perfect, but I think I think it should have gotten or deserved a lot better rating than it has. But honestly, how did you feel? Did you see the show at all? Was it worth your time? Or did you feel kind of let down by it? Or was this a genuine surprise, and did you feel like you kind of got what you needed to out of the finale? I would like to know, and if you'd like to let me know down in the comments, I'd appreciate it. I really do appreciate any time you spend watching my show. Thank you, and I hope to see you again.